Gaza's two largest hospitals, Al-Shifa and Al-Quds, have stopped functioning as Gaza's health system collapses under relentless Israeli bombardment and blockades. On Saturday, Al-Shifa Hospital ran out of fuel, forcing doctors to remove dozens of premature babies from incubators. 6 preemies have already died. Doctors are struggling to keep more than 30 other babies alive. Palestinian health officials have accused Israel of using snipers to shoot at people inside the hospital complex where thousands of displaced Palestinians have sought refuge. Israel's claimed Hamas runs a command center below the hospital. Hamas and medical officials at the hospital have denied the claim. On Sunday, Dr. Mohammed Obeid, a surgeon with Doctors Without Borders, described the dire situation inside the hospital.
The situation now is very bad. We don't have connection. There is no internet. Sometimes we have some issues on the call phone. We're on the 4th floor, and also there's a sniper who attacked 4 patients from the inside the hospital. One of them has the gunshot directly in his neck, and he has a quadriplegia, and the other one, he has a gunshot in the abdomen. Some of the people which actually go outside the hospital, they want to go to the south, they bomb them also. They bomb the family from the Shifa hospital today in the morning. There is no electricity actually, there is no water, there is no food. So our team is exhausted. We have 2 neonate patients die actually because the incubator, it's not working because there is no electricity. Also we have adult patient in the ICU. He died because the ventilator is shut down because there is no electricity. We can see actually the smoke around the hospital. They hit everything around the hospital, and they hit the hospital many times.
That was Dr. Mohammed Obeid, a surgeon with MSF, Doctors Without Borders, inside the Al-Shifa hospital. On Sunday, Democracy Now! Reached another doctor in Gaza City, Dr. Fadel Naim.
We at Al-Ahli Arab Hospital, the Baptist Hospital, are the only functioning hospital in the Gaza City. All the injured people and other people like people with hypertension or diabetes mellitus or diarrhea or asthma or children with dehydration, cancer patients, patients with kidney failure who need dialysis, pregnant women, and other cases are coming to our hospital because they have no other possibility to go to other hospitals. The other hospitals are surrounded by the Israeli tankers, like the biggest hospital in Gaza, Shifa Hospital, and Nasser Pediatric Hospital. Some of the angio hospitals are closed because of the shortage in foil and equipment. Since yesterday, we received more than 300 to 400 injured people and tens of other people who had other health problems. We had to do some surgical interventions in the corridors and on the courtyard because of the shortage of anesthesia, drugs. Our biggest problem is the shortage in manpower because we are a small hospital. We are not prepared to receive such like these numbers of patients at one time. Many volunteers came to help us, but we need specialized doctors in different specialties, in general surgery, in neurosurgery, chest surgery, vascular surgery, and gynecology, in pediatricians. Unfortunately, we couldn't help many of these patients. Some of them died because we couldn't do anything for them.
That was Dr. Fadel Naim speaking Sunday from Al-Ahli Al-Arabi Hospital in Gaza City. To talk more about the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, we're joined by Dr. Tanya Haj-Hassan. She's a pediatric intensive care physician who works with the humanitarian aid organization Médecins Sans Frontières, MSF, or Doctors Without Borders. She's in regular contact with health professionals in Gaza and previously worked as a medical trainer in Gaza and the West Bank. She's the co-founder of the social media account Gaza Medic Voices, which shares firsthand accounts from healthcare professionals in Gaza. On Saturday, she took part in a vigil outside British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's office in London. She broke down while reading an urgent message from the director of Al-Shifa Hospital in Gaza, Dr. Nidal Hadrous.
We, as medical staff, want to leave, but we cannot. We might not survive until the morning.
Dr. Hassan breaks down as she tries to read a statement from the doctor in Gaza. She sits down, she covers her eyes. Her colleagues also in blue hospital gear put their arms on her.
We might not survive till the morning. We don't want to be killed here, just only because we remain committed to our patients and our medical profession. I am calling for help urgently. Please do whatever you can through your government or the international, the ICRC, the Red Cross, to arrange a safe corridor for the medical staff. Please treat this as top urgent. This is the director of the major trauma hospital in Gaza. I'm going to leave you with one more message. To bomb a hospital means to terrify sleeping patients, to break windows over their heads, to make the walls tip onto their bodies, to rip out ventilators and burn oxygen tanks, to ruin equipment that can help human millions of times.
That was Dr. Tanya Haj-Hassan, pediatric intensive care physician who works with the humanitarian aid group Doctors Without Borders, reading an urgent message from the director of Al-Shifa Hospital in Gaza, Dr. Nidal Hadrous. Dr. Haj-Hassan, thank you so much for joining us. You must be, to say the least, beyond exhausted. You were reading that statement in London. I last saw you in Jordan, and now you're in Toronto, Canada. Can you talk about the latest? That was Saturday. This is now 2 days later.
Yeah. Just to be clear, this was a vigil with multiple healthcare providers present who have been working in the Gaza Strip for over a decade. And we're all in tears. I mean, every day we feel like we've reached the worst. And I'm going to quote one of my colleagues in Gaza, a young female surgeon, who said, every day we think that we've reached the worst thing that could ever happen, and it's impossible that the world will be silent to it, and it will definitely get better. And we finally reach the end. And then the next day it proves that there's something even worse. And I share that sentiment. We have descended into a very dark era for humanity. Let me just paint a picture for you of the conditions as far as I know them right now at Al-Shifa Hospital. I'd been receiving updates up until about an hour and a half ago. It's very difficult to receive updates. As you know, communication has been cut off, so they're intermittent. There's certain individuals who have intermittent connection. Al-Shifa Hospital is the largest trauma hospital in Gaza. It is under complete siege. It has been come under a direct attack by Israeli forces for over a week now. The medical staff, including Médecins Sans Frontières, MSF staff, are physically in the hospital at the moment. There are patients there in critical condition, hundreds of patients, and there are thousands of internally displaced individuals who are still inside that hospital, completely under siege, surrounded by Israeli tanks. They have no access to food. They're surviving on minimal dates and biscuits that are left in the hospital. They have no access to water. They describe being very thirsty. And as you know, they have no access to electricity. After the fuel supply was cut off, the electricity supply was cut off, and more recently, the solar panels were bombed. They describe over 100 bodies lying on the ground, decomposing, dead bodies that they cannot bury. This is after having to dig mass graves in the garden of the hospital. The morgues cannot be cooled to preserve the bodies. As you know, there's no electricity. So they're decomposing. The intensive care unit was targeted twice in the last 24 hours. There are 28 patients there. 2 of them have passed away over the course of the evening. These are the adult patients. They have no access to oxygen. Dialysis patients who require electricity to run the dialysis machines because they have kidney failure do not have access to those dialysis machines. I can describe to you in detail what death will look like for these patients. Toxins will develop in their bloodstream. They will become overloaded with fluid because they cannot pee it out. They cannot pee the toxins out either. They will feel very unwell. They will probably get very confused. They'll have difficulty breathing, and eventually they'll die. This is a slow, horrible, painful death, preventable, painful death, like all the deaths in Gaza. Anyone who moves inside the hospital is getting directly killed. 2 nurses were killed by snipers in the last 24 hours. Anyone who tries to leave the hospital is targeted. You mentioned the 38 premature newborns, 3 of whom who've died are currently outside of their incubators at risk of hypothermia without access to oxygen, and I'm not sure how they're going to provide them with all the things they need, including food. This is an entire hospital that's completely cut off, and we've had very little to no news from the other hospitals in the north of Gaza. Last we heard, they're completely surrounded, like El Shifa Hospital. And, you know, we're in a situation where there has been a systematic attempt to destroy civilian Palestinian livelihood and existence in all of Gaza, not just the north. 30% of the killed have been in the south of Gaza, which is supposed to be the safe zone. Humanitarian corridors, or so-called humanitarian corridors, are called the corridor of death by Gazans because they get directly targeted as they're trying to flee on these corridors. You know, Doctors Without Borders, and I mentioned we're really struggling to contact a lot of the staff. One of my colleagues who I know at El Shifa said, we are sure we are alone now. No one hears us. We are alone. MSF was established, one of the main principles of MSF's establishment by journalists and doctors decades ago was to provide testimony, this concept of témoignage, which means bearing witness, to provide testimony, to bear witness on these sorts of atrocities that are not exposed, and to relieve the suffering of those who experience them. And we're in a situation where we can't do either of those things. One of our MSF staff who is staying in Gaza City, but not physically in the hospital at the moment, said there are dead people on the streets. I'm going to read his quote. There are dead people on the streets. We see people being shot at. We can see injured people. We can hear them crying for help, but we cannot do anything. It is too dangerous to go outside. Ambulances cannot reach the wounded. You mentioned Dr. Hammam Alul earlier, who was on your program a couple days ago, describing how he had refused to leave the hospital and desert his patients. I knew Dr. Hammam. He was a beacon of light. He's a gift to the world of medicine and his patients. He was a brilliant nephrologist, was one of the most highly trained doctors in Gaza. He was transforming the care of patients with chronic renal disease, the same patients that I told you are now subject to a slow and horrifying death. He spent a decade learning how to serve his people. He also has a very young family. He was killed in his wife's home along with his father.
His father-in-law, and his brother-in-law.
His young children and the rest under the rubble at the moment, and they've been calling out to the Red Cross to try and help evacuate, and the Red Cross cannot reach them for all the reasons that I mentioned. You know, I can't believe that I'm having to say this, but healthcare providers, healthcare facilities,